Welcome to the Powercat Podcast, the original K-State sports show. Here's your host, Tim Fitzgerald.
Welcome to the GoPowercat.com Powercat Podcast, the normal weekly one, the one we do year-round, taking your questions from Wabash Station, as we love to do. Everyone can watch or listen to the show, but to ask the questions, you got to be a VIP member at GoPowercat.com, and you should go check that out. We do a lot of pretty cool VIP stuff for our subscribers. In fact, Cole Carmody's Tale of the Tape will be coming out very soon at GoPowercat for our VIP peoples as he breaks down the previous game. I'm Fitz, that's Cole Carmody, and that's Ryan Gilbert, who is going to be a little bit soft focus. It's kind of like a romantic scene at his apartment. Maybe turn down the lighting a little bit, a little soft focus on you. But you look good, Gilbert. You're supposed to respond.
I'm not going to say anything. I'm not going to say anything.
Okay. You're not going to encourage me in any way?
No. But I'm like negative, or I guess zero reinforcement is that's the route I'm taking here.
That's how that works.
Okay, yep. Whatever. We're sponsored by The Fridge. If you're a fun person, unlike Ryan Gilbert, stop by The Fridge and load up for the game on Friday night. Don't bring that home booze. Get your fresh booze right from the booze tree at The Fridge. You've got the best harvesting crew ever, and they're probably harvesting the freshest alcohol possible to put into their store to sell you on Friday. Stop at The Fridge at the corner of this and that in the town in which we live. Longtime sponsors of the Powercat Podcast. As I mentioned, it's your questions from Wabash Station, and Ryan Gilbert is the fine, adept reader of the questions. Take it away, Gills.
First question is from Cat in KC. Has the offense evolved any since the Pop-Tarts Bowl? The play calling looks to be just what you would think an offensive line coach would call. The creative passing that Wells was to bring has not developed. Seems like we are closer to Mess's offense than Klein. Thoughts?
I don't totally agree with that. I think they showed some stuff in the bowl game. They just haven't shown much this year. I just think they haven't felt a need to show a lot when they needed to on Saturday in New Orleans. They did pull some stuff out, but talk to me Saturday. If they put another boring offensive performance out there in what's a pretty big game for K-State, then I'm going to be worried. If they don't dig into any tricks and open this thing up a little bit and get a little more creative and challenging, they just don't seem to be challenging the defense very much. I think I'm going to have some issues, but let's get to Friday and then see what happens before I decide if the offense totally stinks. I think they've been sitting on their hands. They've almost played it too close at Tulane, but I know they got a lot of stuff in there that they haven't even come close to using. And I know this, they really are worried about Avery and keeping him upright because I think there's a feeling within the building. There's a huge drop off between Avery and whomever else might be the quarterback. And they're going to have to live with a little danger there to try to get through because you can't make him not Avery. Then you've got a lesser quarterback and he's easier to replace. So I don't know. I hope they open it up. They really need to.
Guys, I kind of struggle with that question a little bit. Obviously, being an offensive line guy, now an offensive line coach myself, Andy Reid's an offensive line coach, right? And he's widely regarded as being the best play caller in all of football right now. And so I don't necessarily think that the stereotype that offensive line coaches don't run good offenses, I don't buy that, to be quite honest. But also, guys, we got to look at it this way. K-State is playing a non-conference game against Arizona, who is a conference team. But you look on the schedule, and it doesn't take a genius to realize that the following week, yes, they have to go on the road, but they're probably playing their second worst opponent in BYU. I mean, I don't think too many people would argue that Tulane is better than BYU. Tulane is better than BYU. Sorry, screw that saying up. Tulane is better than BYU. And while it will be hard to win in Provo, it's not like they're holding anything for conference play. You're going up against a conference opponent, and the team you play the next week, while it will be a challenging game, it's a lesser opponent than the previous 2 weeks in Tulane and Arizona. And so if you're holding your cards for conference play, that just doesn't make any sense. And so it's not like they're going to hold anything back this week. And if they are holding something back, it tells me Avery's not completely healthy, which I don't buy. I think he is fully healthy. Some of those plays he made were absolutely ridiculous. Or B, they're just maybe not fully on board with him to make those kind of plays just yet. I think that's going to happen. But guys, what we have to realize still, he's going into his 4th career start. And so things happen. The offense will evolve, but I don't think this has anything to do with the offensive coordinator or the co-offensive coordinator. I think it says more about the personnel. And quite honestly, I know people were frustrated with Chris Kleiman's answer about wanting to run more plays. Guys, I'm totally bought in on that. They are going too slow. They are not running enough plays. I think that's going to be an emphasis. Let's do some more tempo. Let's run some more plays. And I think that's going to really pay dividends for this group.
I agree. I mean, I think Avery would prefer a faster pace. And I think they've got to do that. I think they're being way too cautious on offense. Yeah. Way too cautious.
Only thing I'll add, guys, Cat and KC, the question here, I think a lot of fans and maybe ourselves here to an extent kind of believed that this would, not maybe believed, but just got the feeling this would be some sort of new revamped offense with Matt Wells coming in. And that really just, I don't know, that wasn't supposed to be the case. And that obviously really hasn't been the case. But, you know, Matt Wells has spoken in press conferences and he's mentioned that, you know, Kansas State had great success with Colin Klein, the 2nd highest scoring team in the Big 12 last season. So Cat and Casey, that's probably the biggest thing here is the expectations. We should not really have thought that it was going to be a brand new offense installed, right? There's certainly some things, some tweaks here and there that some flavor that Wells has added, but by and large, we should not have expected anything as far as wholesale changes go in the offense. So saying it hasn't adapted or evolved since the Pop-Tarts Bowl, maybe there is some truth to that, but guys, it really wasn't supposed to be that much different than what we saw in December.
Correct. And keep in mind that the offense put up 34 points in the opener. They had the block punt for a touchdown and then 27 points at Tulane because they had the scoop and score for a touchdown. And those aren't bad numbers at all.
I was just going to say that. I agree.
Yeah, but I just don't think we see the rhythm and character, like personality coming out of this offense. And I thought Coach Kleiman nailed it when he said, we don't know what we are right now. We don't know if we're a blitz team, a zone team, a man team, and offensively, we don't know if we are an RPO team or a running team. They haven't defined themselves. They better define what they are and be that really well because it's going to catch up to them.
Mm-hmm.
Next question from Wayne Cron 47. Does the old adage of having 2 quarterbacks mean you have none apply to the offensive coordinator role? Are the 2 OCs in sync with the new role?
No, I mean, the one guy is calling plays. They're not bickering over who's calling plays. I mean, Matt Wells will throw in suggestions, but Connor Riley's calling the plays. Don't get lost in titles, folks. Titles are there to add money to your salary. Mm-hmm. Yes, you get some responsibilities. You know, he's basically the vice president. So if Chris Kleiman can't finish his term in office, he'll become the head coach. But he also is underneath. So he's underneath Chris Kleiman in the pecking order, Matt Wells is, but he's also underneath Connor Riley in the offensive pecking order. It's very confusing, but Connor Riley's in charge of this show.
Connor Riley is the assistant to the regional manager, for those of you who watch The Office. And then you have Matt Wells, who is basically Jim Halpert, right? So it's like, you know, you I think Connor Riley, quite honestly, is probably the number 2, right? If Chris Kleiman has a question with something that's going on to the offense, he's not going to go to Matt Wells. He's going to go to Connor Riley. And part of that is because they've been together for so long. And so I firmly believe that, you know, I think, honestly, Coach Riley would tell you this, the buck stops with him, right? Like, he's the one who needs to figure the thing out. When it comes down to any offensive problem, they are going to go to Connor, and Connor will bring that to Matt. Like, that's how this works. And will they sit in the office together and scheme up plays and figure out and game plan? Yes, they will. Will they then take that to their other assistant offensive coaches? Yes, they will. But Connor Riley serves and acts as the offensive coordinator, to the best of my understanding anyway, because he's the one who's been here. He's the one who's been around these guys, recruited them, been around Chris Kleiman. And so I think he takes that responsibility. And you know what? If he wants to be a head coach, which I know that that's something that he desired to do later in his career, he needs to be the one that takes in control of this offense. And I think Chris Kleiman understands that and fully supports it. And so does Matt Wells, for that matter.
Agreed.
Yeah, the offense is in a better spot with Matt Wells here. Obviously, there has been a number of issues that have gone behind K-State's struggles this year, whether that's focus, execution, using your eyes, the coaching, the offensive coordinators probably aren't off the hook, but, Connor Riley is certainly better off with Matt Wells on his staff. And, I don't really envision them bickering or arguing over play calls, right? So, I mean, there's probably a few kinks that maybe need to be worked out in terms of play calling. I don't think any of us are going to deny that, but, in terms of the problems on, through the first two games for Kansas State, this, co-offensive coordinators working together is near the bottom.
Fitz, I have a question for you, because you're around these guys a lot more, and Gilbert, you too, for that matter, than obviously I am right now. But I would be curious to know, because I know Connor Riley is calling the plays, but they've talked about Matt Wells being the one who's talking to Avery. Right. So is Connor Riley calling the plays and then having Matt Wells relay said play to Avery Johnson? Or is Avery hearing both Connor Riley and Matt Wells in his ear? Because that would be something that I don't necessarily think would get him confused. But if you're going through Matt Wells, I mean, it would make sense to give Matt Wells the play call, who then would relay it to Avery. And so I would be interested in that. And I don't know if that's something that we can figure out, or if that's something they would even tell us, or if, quite frankly, that's something we need to know. But I think there is a little bit of a deeper level of like, hey, trying to get down to the bottom of how can the offense be most efficient. And, if one of those two scenarios aren't happening, maybe we see the other scenario happen.
I agree. Gills, remind me to ask Connor Riley that on Wednesday when we go to that press conference, usually the Thursday. That's your 13th remind me command of the day. He's pretty much my memory now.
I try my best. I've got to start getting a Google Docs or like a Sheets set up with everything I've got, and space it out here. This day I've got to do this for Fitz. This day I got to do that. So it's a lot, man. This is a tough job.
You see what we just did? We just portrayed the coach and quarterback relationship. I posed something to you, Fitz, and then you said the exact same thing to Gilbert. See how this is all working out?
Yep, I like it.
Next question is from Claws Out, Balls Out. Are we trying to fit Avery into our offense rather than trying to fit our offense to Avery?
Ooh.
I think there's a point there, but is this the offense? I don't know if this is even the offense, or if it's just like the very base structure of the offense that we're seeing. If this is it, but I don't think it is. And I think they'll get Avery going here. I think they'll turn him loose a little bit. I think he took my question about running timid or careful, like I was saying something about him. I just think there's been so much talk about him getting injured. He's not quite as definitive as he was before. And, he correctly is steering out of bounds, but he's also, he's in the past, he's turned that ball upfield and split defenders and been gone. And now he's not really trying to do that on some downs. He's just trying to pick up some yards to get out of bounds, which is probably the noble and right thing to do if you're trying to avoid injury, but it's also not the way he plays football typically. And I'm interested to see if he kind of gets that going again, because it's an awfully big weapon that will cause a lot of confusion on the defensive side of the ball. If you got him going as a true runner, along with DJ Giddens and Dylan Edwards, the tight ends, the receivers, they need to start stressing defenses more with these weapons. Instead, they seem to parse out the weapons like they're, they only got so much to use of each one. Just put them out there and put a lot of pressure on the defense.
Fitz, what did he say? I'm sorry if it looks like that. I'm sorry if you feel that way.
No, he said, sorry, I made you feel that way.
Yeah.
He didn't like say, sorry, you feel that way, jerk. He said, sorry that I made. He's like taking ownership for something he did. It was so him.
Yeah.
You know, just such a good kid that he took the blame, even though it's nothing of his fault. But that was funny. That was funny.
Well, I think Avery is the offense. I mean, that's everything we've heard, right? So whenever Avery Johnson gets going, it's going to be because this offense gets going. And whenever this offense gets going, it's going to be because Avery Johnson gets going. And there's a lot of people on social media, which is quite honestly, guys, why I try and stay off of social media during games, because there's a lot of people who are overreactors, believe it or not. And a lot of people have kind of come to this imaginary idea that Avery Johnson, his potential is what he is right now. And even though we've seen 2 games in 2024 of Avery Johnson, guys, he hasn't been bad. Like, think back to Will Howard's beginning of the season last year. And it's not fair to compare Will to Avery. I'm doing it, but it's not fair. But remember, we talked about Will Howard's struggles. And you compare those struggles to these struggles, I think everybody would have gladly taken what Avery Johnson has put up statistically this year compared to what Will Howard did in the first few games of the season last year. And it's not fair to Will. It's not fair to Avery. I understand that. But you have to look at the whole picture and say, this is where Avery is now. This is obviously where the coaches think he'll get to. And I'm going to believe the coaches. I mean, they wouldn't sit here and tell us he has all this potential unless he did. And so I'm choosing to believe the guys who've been in football their entire life and are coaching for the program that they're at, because that is not what they do. They do not sit there and tell the media things unless they really believe it. And I think it's going to happen, and I think it's going to happen sooner rather than later.
Agreed.
To go back to what you said a few moments ago, Cole, about Avery being the offense or the offense running through Avery, I don't necessarily agree or disagree with that. I just don't know if that's true right now, because you can have a lot of success with DJ Giddens. We have seen that this season. We think that there can be a lot of success with Dylan Edwards if he is given the ball, which we haven't seen. And the wideouts, we've, high hopes there, low, and we'll get into that wideout, stuff in the next question, but low, production on the field so far. So I don't know if Avery has to be that guy or not. And we'll certainly find out more about that on Wednesday. But you mentioned, Will Howard. Think if Will Howard was on this roster, or Adrian Martinez was the backup, or Skylar, whoever it may be, somebody that can go out and win games as the backup. And that's with all due respect to Knuth and Roberson. But you guys got to think, how much more aggressive is Avery Johnson being with his legs? Maybe not against UT Martin in week 1, but against Tulane last weekend. I certainly think that that's something to bring up here is, Fitz, you mentioned it. I'll be the first one to tell you that I kind of believe that the backup battle between Knuth and Roberson was a great thing, showing that they're competing with each other. And that's, still certainly true. But you look at how cautious they're being with Avery, especially on Saturday in New Orleans. That's probably not the best look for the backup quarterback room, or I guess the backup quarterback spot, backup quarterback battle. Avery Johnson, there's a fine line there, and you got to ride it. You got to be aggressive, and you've got to pick and choose your spots when you want to, take a toll on your body compared to throwing it off out of bounds or just picking up 1 or 2 yards from the sideline rather than taking a hit. So, I mean, that's a long-winded answer with Avery and the offense revolving, what comes first, Avery or just the offensive scheme. I think a lot of these questions, but, it's kind of the easy way out, though, is that everything that we're talking about is going to kind of get answered on Friday.
Agreed.
Yep.
They better provide answers. The Purple Nation's a little restless, and they need to go out and look like a really good football team, which they're capable of doing.
Last question of the first half is from David Carey. A little concerned about the lack of productivity from the wide receiver group. Thoughts on their performance through 2 weeks?
Well, they haven't really thrown the ball downfield much. I mean, Avery's just not real accurate right now from the pocket. And so until they start moving him around, I mean, you could see that start to happen, and he was spreading the ball around pretty well. But I'm going to be really honest here. I think a lot of it's the receivers. I think we saw some guys at Tulane missing assignments, running wrong patterns. I don't know. I'm really disappointed in and a couple of those guys, but I think overall it's still a pretty good room, and I think they'll get going. I know he and Jace Brown have a great relationship, but we've seen that come, to reality in games. So I think, again, this goes back to how they're operating the offense in a conservative nature. They're just not putting the ball downfield very often. And if they do so, it's a long shot over the top where it's probably not going to get picked off.
I think too, Fitz. I mean, I actually, who do you want to be productive, right? Like, that's the question. I think it's pretty obvious that Jace Brown's the number one wide receiver on this team. He is the most talented receiver. Now, will he be able to consistently put up 100 yards receiving? I don't think so, because he's kind of going to be one of those guys to where he is the deep shot. It's kind of a hit or miss. That's who Avery's going to throw the ball down the field to. I mean, do you want Dante Cephas to have 50, 60 yards receiving a game? I don't think that's realistic right now. I mean, Keegan Johnson can do that. Guys, I'm really impressed with Keegan Johnson. I know he only has a handful of catches on the season, but that one-on-one ball that he won, great throw from Avery Johnson down the sideline. He went up, jumped up in the air, and caught the football. I've been impressed with Keegan Johnson. He had a nice jet sweep. They're going to kind of figure it out. They're going to start to rotate in the guys that they think they can win with. And I think, quite honestly, right now, I think you're seeing more guys kind of work their way out of that mix than necessarily work their way into that mix. I don't know what role Jaden Jackson has on this team right now, to be completely blunt, guys. Like, some of the stuff
I forgot about him.
Yeah, I know. And if you were to go back and look at snap counts, he got a lot of snaps on Saturday. And I think that there's so many guys in that room that have a higher ceiling and have a higher upside than number 0 right now. And that's not a shot at Jaden Jackson, but we know who Jaden Jackson is, right? We know who he is. He's not going to fly by guys. He'll make the catch on a dig route, and that's about it. But I want to see Trey Spivey. I want to see them throw the ball to Dante Cephas. Guys, he had that amazing one-handed catch that was out of bounds. He is a freak athlete when it comes to being at the receiver position. So put him in positions to be successful. That's what they did with Sterling Lockett. He was wide open on that seam route down the field. That's what they've done with Keegan Johnson, giving him jet sweeps. He was so successful at Iowa doing that. That's what they've done with Jace Brown. So I think they're starting to figure out the personnel that they want. We're going to see Jace Brown. We're going to see Keegan Johnson. We're going to see Trey Spivey. We're going to see Sterling Lockett, and that's who we're going to see, and Keegan Johnson. So that's who we're going to see. Those 5 guys, they're going to be the ones that play. Rotate them in and see what they can do. And if one guy starts to be not very good, well, guess what? It's a process of elimination. Let guys take themselves out of the rotation as opposed to forcing guys in it.
Agreed.
That's where I was, Cole, you mentioned Cephas's ball down the sideline. I think that was the first quarter early on against Tulane. Avery Johnson just didn't put a good ball out there. And Sterling Lockett was wide open. Avery Johnson just kind of missed him. And so if Tom Brady's out there throwing passes to these guys, we're probably not having this sort of discussion. If every ball was 100% accurate, these guys have gotten open. They haven't played great, but they certainly haven't been bad. I mean, there's been some, factually speaking, Dante Cephas has not caught a pass this season. Jaden Jackson's underperformed. It could be so much better, but Trey Spivey's been a pleasant surprise. 4 receptions on the season doesn't sound like much, but through the first 2 games, I would have taken the under on that, right? And so Sterling Lockett was wide open. Keegan Johnson, now that he's healthy, probably trending in the right direction. And of course, Jace Brown, you mentioned it, with his connection to Avery Johnson, is appearing to be wide receiver 1. And so they haven't necessarily, the wideouts, Matthew Middleton's group, hasn't necessarily proven that they're bad or poor or anything like that. They just haven't proved that they're great and amazing, which they're in favor of being great. But this is, again, with an Arizona team, we'll get into this matchup more in the second half a little bit, but a team that probably is better offensively than defensively. K-State's going to have its chances to obviously take some deep balls in that Arizona game, especially if you can set up the run early. That will really give Avery Johnson some opportunities to fire and, maybe provide some more accurate passes to those guys and maybe quiet this discussion. And so none of this is a shot on Avery, but Avery Johnson, if he's been more accurate, we're probably not having this sort of debate.
True. He hasn't been as accurate as we would think. He certainly isn't as accurate as we saw in practice with some of these deep balls. So it'll be curious, but games are different than practice. Something's on the line, and we'll see what K-State looks like on Friday night. And I know this, I truly believe when the heat gets turned up, Avery Johnson will rise up to meet that because that's just the kind of player he's always been and everything he's done. That's it for the first half of the Powercat Podcast, sponsored by Fridge Wholesale Liquor. We'll be back on the other side with more discussion of the Cats and Cats on Friday night as Arizona roars into town for an opponent that's in the Big 12, but it's a non-conference game. It's so confusing. And I'm old, and I get confused easily. But now I get a little break.
We'll be right back after these messages from our sponsors.
Please visit the Fridge Wholesale Liquor, located at the corner of Claflin and Westport Road in Manhattan, Kansas.
Welcome back to the show. Let's return to the Cats and Dogs studio.
Welcome back to the Powercat Podcast. Fitz and Coles and Gills all collected together in our weekly questions format, taking questions from Wabash Station, one half down, another half to go. Remember to always support the Fridge Wholesale Liquor whenever you're in Manhattan. Please do so. They've been a great sponsor for us for many, many years. Please support them. Ryan Gilbert, take it away.
That was quick. Wow. Fitz is trying to fly through this, huh?
Yes, I'm tired. I'm so seriously, Gills. I didn't ever catch up from returning from New Orleans. I've been dragging all week, and I'm like, I got to get through this week. I got a busy day tomorrow, too.
Yep. Makes two of us. From Go Stay Kate, how important is it to not put anything on tape? If we win Tulane in 2022, does it cost us the Big 12 championship?
That's a great question. We don't know. I think in some ways it's overdone. I can see protecting some things. Maybe they have a whole different sequence of plays that they don't want to show, from formation to personnel. That I can buy into, but just holding back plays, come on. I mean, over the course of years, you're going to put stuff on film and people know it. I'm a big believer in do it so well that they can't stop it. Mm-hmm. And if they want to commit all their resources to stop the run, throw the ball, they want to drop back and try to prevent you from passing, run the ball. It's just basic crap. Get back to that and quit trying to out gamesmanship by holding back stuff. Open up the playbook enough to win games and show something that will, kind of excite the fans and get the team rolling, get a little steam about you. As I've mentioned, college football now is a beauty contest along with winning games. You got to look good. And if you don't look good, you're going to be in less favor for the college football playoff if you don't win your conference. So I think K-State better get it cranking.
I think there's an argument can be made that, and Big B's talked about this multiple times, but guys, why not put so much out there that you confuse the opponent when they're trying to prepare for you? Instead of trying to not put things on tape, do the opposite. Put so much on tape that they have to prepare so much. And so if we know, there are a few things in life that are guarantees: death, taxes, and K-State running power. Teams are going to prepare for the pulling guards and pulling tackles when K-State runs power, right? That's going to happen. And so they're going to spend 60% of the time when they're preparing for K-State's running game, it's going to be to try and stop the power, right? That's a given. But why not throw a power reverse where, they pitch it to DJ, who then pitches it to Jace Brown on an end around? Throw that in there. And even if you don't run it, you're making them practice it, which is in turn taking time away from stopping to practice what you do best. And so, I understand, I guess, not wanting to put the specific plays out there, but if the defense thinks that it's going to be power, even if they've practiced the reverse, there's still a good chance that either they're stopping it or they're not. It's football. Right. And so I think, honestly, the more you can get out there early in the season will help you down the line, because we're at the point in the year Arizona knows what K-State's going to run, and K-State knows what Arizona's going to run. So just call the best play that you feel the most confident in and roll with it, because at the end of the day, that's all you can do.
K-State's 2-0, but social media is not happy. Our message boards are not happy. And I get it. I'm not trying to say that fans are wrong for not being overjoyed by the starts K-State's had in each of its 2 games. But guys, the 2 plays of the year have been probably the blocked punt against UT Martin, right? And then the scoop and score with Romaine and Fabris against Tulane, probably, right? That's a defensive play where a guy just went out and made a play. And then also give K-State credit for scheming that, right? Cole, you could probably break that down a million times better than I could, but that was schemed to block that punt, right? Right? But so give them credit. That being said, though, there hasn't been much schemed offensively for fans to just get pumped up and getting excited, right? Fitz, you said that, Big B's mentioned this too. Style points matter in college football. Like you want to win the Heisman Trophy, you've got to be a charismatic, energetic individual, right? That's just a fact. And so that's
Good
one
word.
of the knocks. Thank you, Cole. But
Big
that's
word
one of
for
the knocks I've got with the play calling. Is it's kind of K-State's the play calling's fault that fans aren't excited, right? There hasn't been Dylan Edwards, right? Of course, we've talked about that so much that he hasn't been given the ball. Go end around, trick play, flea flicker, whatever you want to do something to energize those fans. I'm not necessarily calling for that against Arizona, but energize that fan base. And that's kind of where, the whole thing with putting stuff on tape, that's my biggest issue. The other thing, I know I've touched on this, we've touched on this with Tulane is, guys, Tulane was legit. Tulane came to play. Like, you should have realized very early on that, okay, if you're K-State, you probably aren't going to come out of here with a win if it's ISO up the middle for half of your plays with DJ Giddens, right? And so luckily K-State made enough plays to get out with a win, but that could have been a much more comfortable game if they had opened up the playbook. And so again, 2-0, K-State hasn't lost a game yet, but that's kind of just some frustrations on my end.
You know what it is, guys? You talk about, and the more I sit here and think about this, like we talk about exciting play calls, getting the fans excited for the offense. Guys, all that it is seeing the athletes with the ball in space, right? That's all that it is. If you can get your athletes with the ball and have space to move, then that's what gets the fans excited. So if that's a bubble screen and Dylan Edwards can make a guy miss or DJ can truck a guy, then fans are excited. If that's throwing a deep ball, then that gets fans excited. But fans don't like running power. Fans don't like running the counter. That's not what they like. You know what sucks for K-State? They're actually really good at it.
No.
And so that's I think where, it's hard because K-State wants to do what they're really good at, and they need to do what they're really good at. And that's running the ball with your NFL running back, as Big B said on the Insiders. But they do need to give the ball to their athletes in space.
I'm going to say it. The fans and the media think this offense is boring. Well, DJ Giddens carried the ball 19 times for 114 yards, averaging 6 yards a carry. If you have a running back picking up 6 yards a pop, you give him the ball.
Yep.
You do. But the other argument is, well, Dylan Edwards touched it 4 times for 54 yards. But I think they've relied on the baseline of DJ Giddens so well. It's been effective. If you're a defense, though, do you turn your attention to stopping him when the threat of Avery and Dylan and the other guys is still there? It's interesting. I think DJ Giddens is the one set up for the most success this year because they much rather give you 6 yards a pop than Dylan Edwards going for 15 yards a touch. It's an interesting quandary for defensive coordinators, but I would still like to see this offense put more pressure on those defensive coordinators.
Mm-hmm.
As the hoops guy, it's been a while since we've talked about basketball, so I've got to slip this in a little bit. Bruce Weber, what was probably the number one issue among fans? Maybe not issue, but reason people didn't like him was because it was a boring brand of basketball, right? For right or wrong, he won, he lost, whatever, but it wasn't the most exciting thing to watch. And so Kansas State, give fans a reason to cheer on Friday. That's all I'll say.
Okay. I like that.
Thank you. I need your approval. That's all that matters for me.
No, I know it really does.
Next question. It's a long one. Hopefully I don't mess this up. From Kat
You
in
will.
Colorado. We know K-State can't do any better than 2-0, and all their preseason goals are all attainable. But do you think we will look back at year's end and say the first 2 games were a sign of things to come, or were simply part of the progression to year-end excellence?
Well, can I jump in and say if the first 2 games are a sign of things to come, they won both of those games.
Right.
So, I mean, if they would have lost the close game, I would agree with you. But
Right.
they found a way to win a close game. And to me, if winning a close game is a sign of things to come, I sign me up, because I think that means that K-State's winning football games. No, I don't. I think it's progression. I mean, every team goes through ebbs and flows in a season. There's going to be a time where K-State, I specifically, Fitz, before I started working for you, or maybe I was doing it. I don't remember. I remember having a conversation with somebody after K-State lost to Iowa State with Brock Purdy and Breece Hall. And I remember, I was watching that game in the press box. So I must've been having a conversation with somebody when we were all together. But
Yeah,
I
you sit
remember
next to me. Come on, it had to be me. Had to be Gilbert.
But I just remember saying, like, you know what? Is this like the part where K-State can either go down or they can hit this bottom that they're at right now and go up? And they hit that bottom. They went up. They ended up winning the Texas Bowl, win some games in a row. And obviously the rest is history. But, I mean, I'm not saying Tulane felt like that. But, again, it's just kind of one of those things where you have to deal with it. Every team's going to win games. And for K-State, they're probably going to lose a game or two. But I don't think it's going to be because of what we're talking about right now. I'm very confident that Connor Riley, who's been the best position coach on this staff for the last 5 years, can figure it out. I'm sorry. I'm just confident that he can. And I'm confident, and we haven't even talked about the secondary guys, probably because when they needed to make a play against Tulane, they did. But I'm also confident that the defense will figure it out, because they went through the same thing last year against Missouri. The exact same thing happened, and Joe Klanderman figured it out and turned that group into arguably the best defense in the Big 12. So, no, I don't think that what we're talking about right now has any relevance in 2 months.
Back to the, kind of premise of the question, would you take 12-0, but kind of boring and not that fun, or really fun to watch and 10-2? I mean, you take the wins, but I think we'd all prefer fun to watch in 12-0 if they can get there. So I don't know if these first 2 games are indicative of the offensive performance and some of the defensive struggles. This team's not going to be 12-0. It's going to be 8-4. Let's be honest, or maybe less. But if they click it in gear, they could easily end up 12-0 by just taking it one at a time and not tripping over. Look, he passed it. He would. Excuse me. That might pop up in this conference that give you problems. All of a sudden, Arizona State coming to Manhattan late in the year might be a bigger challenge than we thought. Just take care of business 1 week at a time, whether it's ugly or pretty. I'll still complain about something. I'll complain it was too fun to watch. I had too much fun watching this victory. You must stop the fun. I will be the fun hater. I don't know what I'm saying. I'm just saying I'll take the wins, whatever they look like. But boy, I'd like to have a more fun brand of football to see than what we've seen for the last 2 weeks.
Next question is from SnareCat3. Downfield coverage will be essential against the Arizona offense. Did all those lapses against Tulane come at the perfect time to clear up the miscommunication?
That's a good point.
Yeah.
That's a good point. They certainly probably got the players' attention that they didn't prepare well and they didn't know what their assignments were, and it almost cost them. And you're going up against the best receiver quarterback combo probably in college football. McMillan's just elite. I mean, he's a first-round pick. He's going to give you problems. Northern Arizona did a lot of zone and kept everything in front of them and did a good job covering with that zone. So we'll find out. They've got to be better. If they play like they did at Tulane, Arizona's going to score 50 plus. They will. They just will. You can't play that way. But I think they can come after watching that game. Northern Arizona came after Noah Fafita and had some success and rattled him. I think that will probably be still a plan for this K-State front of the defense, is to get after the quarterback and try to protect the back end a bit.
This is going to be the classic bend but don't break game for the K-State defense. I can feel it in my soul because you know how crazy Bill Snyder Family Stadium is going to be on Friday night. They do not want to get with the deep ball. They do not want that energy to get let out of the stadium. They will take zone crossing routes for the entire drive. If that's what Arizona wants to do, they want to throw 4-yard outs. They want to throw 5-yard drags. By all means, K-State is going to take that. And then when they hit the 35-yard line, they're going to tighten down their defense. They're going to blitz, and they're going to try and either knock them out of field goal range or get a turnover. That's just what's going to happen. And I think that's the right strategy because you cannot let McMillan beat you. And for as much as we want to talk about Shedeur Sanders and Travis Hunter, which I feel like for some reason I always talk about Colorado on this.
Here we go.
Podcast, but Fafita and McMillan are better. Like they are better, and they are really good. I watched Noah Fafita, and he kind of reminds me of Tua Gilbert. He's a right-handed throwing quarterback, so it's different from Tua, but he's able to kind of contort his body in a way that much like Tua is, where Tua's not a scrambler, but he's able to get out of the pocket and throw on the run. That's a lot of what Fafita does. Fafita doesn't really scramble down the field. He actually has negative rushing yards for his career, which means he takes quite a few sacks. But he's able to maneuver out of the pocket, and his off-script plays are really good, which is where he finds McMillan a lot. But, yeah, I think, guys, this is a veteran secondary. I'm not worried. You got Jacob Parrish, who started for 3 years. You got Keenan Garber, who's started the last 2 seasons. You've got VJ Payne, who started for a better part of 2.5 years. You got Jordan Riley, who's played a lot of football. I'm not worried. I think they're going to figure it out. On top of that, Marquise Siegel is a quarterback of your defense. Did he have a lapse against Tulane? He did. But he understands that. He'll get better, and this secondary will be just fine.
Agreed.
I also agree.
We all agree.
Last question of the podcast is from Itame Bibi. After Arizona game, who will you be raving about? Offense, defense, or special teams?
I'm going to go with offense. I think they're going to break loose. I've been around Chris Kleiman long enough now. I kind of hear his code words. I think someone put in on the YouTube comments, that sounded like stuff he said about Messingham. And I don't think he's happy with what's going on right now on offense. And I think he wants them to pick up the pace a little bit, be a little more aggressive, try to sustain drives, and don't be so predictable at times. They were so predictable in that last possession they had. It was awful. I mean, it was obvious they were just going to try to run it up the middle. And that's exactly what they did, and they had no success. So I think he wants a little more juice there. And he's not going to – I think he also knows he's got something special. And you don't get these teams very often. You'll probably only have this quarterback for 2 seasons. You better make the most of it and quit screwing around. And I think that's been probably his message in coaches' meetings.
Here's the situation.
Good. Well done.
Thank you.
Well done.
I think it's going to be the offense too. I agree with you. I think we'll be impressed with the defense because I think they're due for a bounce back effort, but nobody would be surprised if K-State only gave up 14 points. Like that's just kind of what they do at home. They just don't give up touchdowns. Like that's just not what they do. They just don't give up touchdowns. I'd have to, and I'll be looking at this more in depth on the walkthrough. Off the top of my head, Fitz, when was the last time a team walked into Bill Snyder Family Stadium and scored 3 touchdowns or more? I don't think it happened last year. I'd have to go back and look, but it's been at least a year. I don't think that's going to happen. So I say all of that to say I think the offense is going to be that much better. And I think the offense is going to be better because people are going to be surprised by it. They're going to be surprised when K-State pushes the ball down their field. They're going to be surprised when they give the ball to Dylan Edwards. They saw the film. They're no idiots. They know what needs to change, and they're going to change it. Fully believe that.
I would agree. I would totally agree. Gills?
We're 3 for 3, guys. I was going to go offense as well. Just kind of going back to what I touched on earlier with special teams they're playing fine. They blocked the punt first game. Check, right? Defense, 2 huge crucial turnovers against Tulane. Check. I just haven't been fully satisfied with the offense yet. And so if K-State does win this game, like hypothetically with the question, right, what will we be raving about? It has to be the offense that finally came together, let the playbook loose. Dylan Edwards finally gets more involved. You have any one of those wide receivers go for 6 catches, 90 yards with a touchdown. Things start to click offensively. If that doesn't happen, it might be a long night for Kansas State, despite how strong that defensive effort might be. And so for K-State to get a win and for us to really be excited and be raving about something, it would definitely be the offense, starting with Avery Johnson.
Gilbert, you know what I think?
What?
I think there's a difference between drinking wine and squashing grapes.
There's a fine line between sipping wine and squashing grapes.
Fitz, you have no idea what we're talking about, do you?
No. Okay, but it's accurate. It's accurate. That's it for this edition of the Powercat Podcast, I think, right, Gilbert? We're done? We're done?
That is it.
Okay, let's make sure we all support the Fridge Wholesale Liquor. Let's make sure we all have fun and be responsible on Friday. And by responsible, I mean have a designated driver, okay? Designate them not to drink. Like, you can name a designated driver, but if they go ahead and drink, they suck at their job. So go in that Friday night game, get focused, get rowdy, and if you can, get drunk.
Ask Gills for a ride on your way.
Yes. Gills is like an Uber, but
yeah,
he gives it for free.
Many years of Pizza Hut delivery experience during the pandemic will pay off at this moment.
Yes.
It's a good career move for you, Ron Gilbert. That's it for the podcast. Thank you, boys. Good job. We will see you hopefully Friday night at the Bill. Well, Cole won't be there because he's got to coach a high school football team, which kind of stinks, but that's okay. I'm going to watch football all day Saturday. Gills, you want to come over and watch football all day Saturday? Because we're going to do it at this house.
I spend too much time with you as is. No, thanks.
That's it. We're done. We're done. I'm done with him. That's just wrong.
This has been a GoPowerCat.com and Spirit Street production. Please support this show by subscribing to this YouTube channel or follow us on your favorite podcast platform.